The UK says it's introducing a carbon levy on some imports that'll begin in 2027. It's part of the effort showing countries are pushing ahead with their climate efforts despite contentious talks last week at COP28 in Dubai. So let me remind you what did come out of it. A fund was established for countries hit by climate change. There were many nations that pledged to triple renewable energy by the end of the decade. And major oil companies agreed to clean up their operations. Rich Lesser is the global chair at the Boston Consulting Group. COP28 was a major milestone, he says. Rich, how do you justify that as a major milestone?
I think first of all, let's acknowledge we've gone 27 COPs prior to this one and never been able to talk about fossil fuels, never really had a holistic agenda for how we were going to manage through an energy transition, never really had as compelling an action agenda. In this COP, you mentioned loss and damage was big progress on food and agriculture, on renewables, on methane leaks, on heavy industry, and an overall agreement at the end that exceeded all of the incoming expectations in terms of being able to identify the levers that we needed to pull to manage an energy transition and call on companies and countries to do it.
Right.
Did it go far enough? No, but
but
frankly,
that's the problem.
27?
But that's the problem,
Yes,
Rich. As we go through each COP and then we fail to reach each target, I agree with you, things are getting better, but they're not getting better or worse fast enough.
Agree. Completely agree. We're growing emissions, having nothing to do with the COP. We're growing emissions 1.5% right now when we need to be shrinking them 7%. We are way, way off track on the speed of the transition. So what we need to do is speed up, and we need to speed up on a whole range of fronts. And we need to deal with adaptation, because however fast we speed up, a lot of parts of the world are going to be negatively impacted. So there's a ton of work to do. And even if this COP is a success, that only sets the stage for what we really need, which is a ton of action on many different fronts.
So let's divide this into two or three different buckets. Because the one thing I do know about climate change and COP is it becomes almost impossible when you deal with everything at once. The money.
Exactly.
Is there enough money through leverage, through PPP, through green bonds, through IMF, World Bank and every other is there physically enough money available to do this?
You could argue there's enough money in theory that people have said they're ready to put against it. But much of that money requires returns that match the risks associated with the projects. The phrase of the industry are bankable projects. There's not enough good projects to be able to attract that funding, which is why we need other kinds of capital, whether it's the World Bank or the IMF or concessionary capital or other things that can help de-risk some of those projects to bring in a lot more private capital. And this COP was a start on that journey. But boy, we have a long way to go. A long way.
What you've basically said is that you can't bring your clients in to many of those deals unless there's a supra lender willing to stand by.
Yes, I mean, I think that's what the banks say. That's what a lot of the asset managers say. That's why they're calling on the World Bank and the IMF. That's why they were excited by the agreement that was announced by the COP presidency to put this $30 billion fund with a $5 billion of concessionary capital layer, which is that special layer that can then bring other capital in. There was a lot of enthusiasm for the announcements at this COP. But to be clear, that's if you started by saying, is there enough yet? No, there's not enough, but this was a good milestone on the way to bringing in a lot more.
So finally, Rich, this battle or disagreement, whatever you want to call it, between phasing out fossil fuels and whatever they finally agreed, did it all feel a bit surreal that they're arguing the semantics and passing the words when at the end of the day we know it means getting rid of fossil fuels eventually?
We need to get rid of the emissions of fossil fuels fully. In fact, we'll need to go beyond that to bring carbon back into the ground at some number of decades down the road. The technologies to do that are still what's up in the air because many of them are not at the cost they need to be. This COP was powerful and that it acknowledged it and it outlined many of the pathways, but it was not specific enough. And it was a call on countries to do it. It wasn't countries committing all to do it. That's what we need to see in these next round of national commitments is bolder commitments, more aggressive action, more money going into driving this decarbonization, and also opening up massive economic opportunities to build new businesses, to create new kinds of jobs. I mean, that's the other side of this.
We'll talk about those as they happen. Which, let's out. I wish you a good Christmas and a Happy New Year.